All right. Thank you again for joining us at the Africa Trade Conference 2021. I am glad that you've joined us today. And so what we're doing here today is really talking about empowering Africans to participate in both intra-Africa trade and global trade. We at the Regal Africa believe that we as Africans need to take advantage of this time in history where we have great opportunities to trade and invest with each other and the world, and we all have the ability to create wealth for ourselves and generations to come. We at Regal Africa believe that trade creates wealth and that sustainable wealth is only through trade and investment, meaning business. And I would like to start by welcoming and thanking all the speakers today. We have great trade experts. We have business leaders who will be talking to us today, and they'll be sharing their insights on trade in Africa and trade with Africa. And tomorrow, it's all about digital trade in Africa. And I also want to thank all the attendees who are able to come in today and join us. And I hope that you'll be able to get nuggets of wisdom and great insight during this conference. Now, before we start, I would like to share some information so that we are very clear about this platform. So currently I'm on Zoom and we are broadcasting on the Event 10X platform that was graciously sponsored by the International Trade Center. So for you who are in the platform, if you have any questions, on the right, there is a video wall. You can just type in questions and all the speakers will be able to answer any questions that you may have. Also, I would like to let you know that during this conference, concurrently, we're actually having the virtual Africa Trade Expo. So even during the breaks, we want to encourage all of you to go to the virtual exhibition booth so that we can be able to see what African brands are doing on the continent, which is very, very, very exciting. Now, what we're going to do before we go into the panel discussion and the keynote speaker, I would like to share with you what we believe at Regal Africa about trade and development in Africa. And so we'll take about 10-15 minutes, just go through a presentation and just making sure that all of you who I know are mostly business people on the continent or looking to do business on the continent, you can be able to have an overarching view about the opportunities that will be happening on this continent. So I'll go ahead and just share my screen so as to just make sure that we are able to have this presentation today. Right, I believe that you can all see my screen. Again, my name is Gaitha. I am the founder and the CEO of the Regal Africa Group, and I'm an international trade and investment expert. And today I'll be talking about trade and development in Africa. Now, when we talk about trade in Africa, really there are numerous opportunities on the continent. And we at Regal Africa keep saying that Africa is open for business, and it's all about trading for development. We at Regal Africa believe that we are the bridge between the world and Africa. We work with our clients to advise them on the investment and trade opportunities that can be found on the continent. At the same time, we are working to showcase African brands and products to the world so the world can purchase goods and services in Africa. And the beauty about trade in Africa is the diversity of goods and services on the continent. If you can see that map that we have about Africa, I mean, I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and we're all about tea. Ethiopia is about coffee. Sudan is about gold. Basically, there's so much diversity of goods and services on the continent. So if you're looking to trade, it is a great time, and you want to look at it holistically about how we can take advantage of the opportunities presented on the continent. And I keep saying, Africa is calling. Africa is calling people in Africa to do trade with itself and also around the world. And of course, there are very many critical things that are needed in order for us to be able to trade for development. And because we keep saying that Africa is ready to trade with the world, historically, we have known that trade has been mostly about exporting raw commodities. right? But the trend is changing. Now Africa is actually building great global brands that happen to be African. The trend is changing. We're able to offer great goods and services, which in essence, through trade, we're able to create wealth for the business owners, we'll create wealth for people on the continent, create jobs, and that leads to sustainable development. Now, of course, trade in goods and services is increasing as Africa continues being part of the global value chain. We are not in isolation, right? So Africa is part of the globe and we are continuously trading with the rest of the world. And I always say that Africa is at the center of the world, right? We're the link between to Europe, we are the link to the Far East, we're the link to Middle East, we are the link to Asia, we're the link to America. Africa is right at the middle. And I would like us all to think about when we're talking about trading development, we're talking about agribusiness, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about the service industry, we're talking about manufacturing. And this is some of the things that we'll be able to discuss during this conference. And especially tomorrow, we're going to have a breakout session about three core sectors, which is agribusiness, healthcare, and services on the continent. Now, of course, when we talk about the opportunity, which is a lot of what people have joined in to listen to, the first thing we want to look at is really about the African Continental Free Trade Area. This became operational this year on January 1st, and it's exciting about what is happening on the continent, the Africa that we want. This is something that has said that we are one African market and we can do trade with each other. Africa covers a market of 1.3 billion people with a GDP of over 2.5 trillion US dollars. We have 55 member states of the African Union, and everyone is excited. These are the opportunities that the AFCFTA provides, and of course, it being one of the largest free trade areas since the formation of the World Trade Organization. If you want to trade, you want to be in Africa, or you want to be doing business with Africans. But the key here we really need to be thinking about is capacity building. So as a business person, right? For example, I'm in Kenya. How do I access the whole continent or the world? And for us at Regal Africa, we say you have to start local, then you move regional. For example, we are in East Africa, so we are part of the East Africa community. Then you start looking at the other regional blocks. Then you go continental and take advantage of the AFCFTA as you begin to continue to trade global. So between the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the regional economic community, that is where the opportunity lies. And today we're going to be having panelists who are experts who will tell us exactly what it is that we need to be looking at. Now, of course, all these things, there's market, right? There's access to market, but there's challenges, right? And of course, when we're talking about trade and development, we need to look at it holistically. And the first critical thing we need to look at is improvement of infrastructure. And we as Africans need to own our infrastructure. That is the challenge that I see on this continent. If we do not own, right? We don't own our ports. We've had stories about that. We need to start building rail. We need to be owning our airlines. And I can tell you for a fact, if we improve the infrastructure, we continue lobbying the government to make sure that they're putting in the right investments in this infrastructure and that we as Africans own it, it will make a tremendous change in trade, because the goal is for us again to focus on intra-Africa connection and the last mile connection. I keep saying that we need to continue linking Cape Town to Cairo, Mombasa to Kinshasa, all the way to Dakar in the west of Africa. And of course, transportation of goods and people is critical when we're ensuring that trade is faster. So as business people, we want to trade faster, right? We want to make sure that it's easily accessible, and we want to make sure that it is affordable, because if not, it affects the bottom line of our business and we're not able to be profitable. And the key here when we're talking about trade and development, historically we've traded out. So if you look at the trade links, if you look at our ports, if you look at our airlines, if you look at everything going on, it's always been about trading out, right? So for Mombasa port, how do you trade out? If it's the Djibouti port, how do you trade out? But now we need to say, you know what? We need to start thinking inward. And if you're going to trade inward, we need to have better roads. We need to have better ports. For example, in Kenya, we have the LAPSET project that is actually linking Kenya to Ethiopia to South Sudan, and that will change the um, environment of trade in this part of the world, in East Africa. So we want to make sure that we are very clear about improving our infrastructure and owning our infrastructure. That is how we're going to trade, and that is how we're going to develop on this continent. Now, what are the new opportunities when we talk about trade in Africa? I think as governments and private sector and academia, we need to move to start actually coming up with the right policies, incentives, and solutions to move from an informal way of doing business to a more formal way of doing business. And this is very important, and I'll highlight that later. Why? Because the fact that we're informal, which is majority of the businesses in Africa, it limits what it is that you can do. And what we're trying to do with trade is the same. We want to trade for good, because we believe that the trade activities that whenever they're done, they reduce poverty in our communities, right? Wherever you see a business, poverty is reduced. And so we want to continue improving trade activities. And what we're saying is government needs to support us, needs to create incentives for these businesses, and ensure that the business community has the ability to set up and grow their enterprises so as to reduce social and economic challenges in the communities that are brought about by poverty. So the only sustainable way to eradicate poverty on the African continent is through business, is through trade and in business. So it's no longer about aid. What we're talking about is trade and not aid, because that will lead to wealth creation for all and economic development on this continent. And for me, who is in business, and for us at Regal Africa, who are always championing businesses, and what we have recognized that the business people are saying is they need more information. Hence, the conferences that we're doing, they need a lot of technical support, because what a business is looking for is, one, they want to access market, they want to access affordable finance, not just any kind of finance, especially in Africa, it's so expensive. And because the financing is very expensive, it's very hard for these businesses to be profitable. So we need to make sure that our businesses are accessing affordable finance, and they're building capacity in their business for business success. And the only way that they can do that is if they're more formal than informal. If you're an informal business, it's very hard to access market unless in your local community. But in your formal, then you can access the market in Africa and the world. If you're informal, you are not able to access affordable finance. But if you're formal and you keep your financial record, you can access affordable finance. If you're informal, it's very hard to build capacity because it's mostly you and a very small team. But if you're formal, you're able to actually build capacity for your business, and that leads to business success. I will highlight 4 things that I believe are very, very important when we're talking about trade and development. And especially during this time, post-COVID, what we've seen for the last 2 years, we recognize that digital transformation is important. Digital transformation is very important for all businesses, especially for SMEs, because it's critical for their survival. Digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modifying existing business processes, cultures, and customer experiences to meet challenging business and market requirements. Remember, this being a conference, historically would have probably been somewhere in Nairobi in a hotel, whereby we would need everybody to travel in so that you could be able to access this conference. But now, because of technology, we are able to be broadcasting in Nairobi, and you, wherever you are in the world, to be able to access this information. And that is what we're saying. We need to have digital transformation in our businesses. And that will ensure that more trade happens in Africa. And we need to start thinking, how do we trade beyond our local communities? We use technology to automate our processes. We get data that is important for us to make good business decisions, and we can scale up and transform the communities we serve. Again, digital transformation of business will ensure reduction of cost of doing business, faster processes, and better quality of goods and services. And I can tell you, for every business person, that's music to their ears. And I believe that digital transformation will lead to more trade and development on the African continent. The second thing we need to be looking at, and a key point when we talk about trade and development, is basically digital trade. We're going to have a whole session, a whole day session tomorrow. And digital trade is really what we call the great equalizer in business. It doesn't matter whether you're in Nairobi, in Cape Town, in Dakar, in Abidjan, it doesn't matter where you are. Digital trade is the great equalizer because you're able to participate more in trade. You can be able to use online platforms and technology-based solutions. E-commerce is essential for SMEs to access new markets. And it is very important that we're taking advantage of this, and we're saying trade and technology go hand in hand, and the more access that we have, the more access that people have to do trade, it will lead to development in rural communities and access to more options in the marketplace. So we've talked about digital transformation, we've talked about digital trade, and now the next thing, which I believe is a great enabler, is digital payments. Digital payments are crucial for trade continuation, and a reduction in costs will ensure fewer expenses for SMEs, and they will turn have more profits, which will enable them to be eligible for funding to grow their business. This conference was free for all of you, but there are people who chose to exit, and they had to make payments. I'm in Nairobi, and people are all over the world. How do they make that payment to me? We created an opportunity for them to be able to pay through mobile money. We used an online payment platform, and we also let them know that they could actually transfer the money to our bank. So what are we saying? Fintech and digital financial solutions will enable trade to happen, intra-Africa trade and global trade. Because even after you access this market, you create contracts, you actually close this deal. How do you get the payment? So for us to ensure that trade and development are happening, then digital payments is very, very important, because it will ensure that payments are done and ensure great flow of trade in Africa. The fourth and the last thing that we need to pay attention to when we're talking about trade and development is really digital trade facilitation. It's very important for cross-border transactions to happen in an effective and efficient manner. Now, of course, digital trade facilitation refers to the application of modern information and communication technologies to simplify and automate international trade procedures. It's becoming very essential to maintain trade competitiveness and enable effective participation in cross-border and e-commerce. We need to all ensure that we're supporting the business community to trade more, because as they trade more, they're able to grow their businesses. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that is able to lead to wealth creation for all, job creation, and development. I do have to say, here in Kenya, we do have Trade that is doing a wonderful job in ensuring that digital trade facilitation is happening here in East Africa. Now, before I bring in our keynote speaker and the rest of the panelists, I do want to share that Regal Africa and the Center of International Trade is the one that brought you the Africa Trade Conference. And what we're doing at the Center for International Trade is really researching about international trade in Africa and East Africa. We're working with governments, we're working with business membership organizations, we're working with global agencies to promote more international trade. And when we talk about international trade, we're talking about both intra-Africa trade, to export on the continent, and global trade. We continue to build capacity for businesses who are interested in international trade. And we do seminars for international trade professionals to make sure that we're trading with one another, and trade is at the center to ensure development happens. And with that, I want to thank all of you again for joining us here at the Africa Trade Conference. Post the conference, we want to let you know that it is great to trade with one another, build connections, network with one another on this platform. We will be having a program called Trade in Africa next year. So you're going to learn more about how how to engage with intra-Africa trade so that you take advantage of the AfCFTA. We have Trade with Africa programs so that you learn about international trade agreements that you can take advantage of, like AGOA. How do you trade with the European Union? How do you trade with Asia? How do you trade with the rest of the world? And so with that, I want to thank you again for joining us. And now we are ready to go into the rest of the conference, where we'll have our third speaker and our panelists who are waiting to share with you their insights about why we need to be trading in Africa. Thank you very much.